You have to go back and start over. So the beginning must be good
evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if we have to make an emergency exit, that door is an exit, and there's a door over there in the corner for an exit. As I generally say, let the committee go first, you just fend for yourselves. Okay. So I've got the housekeeping toilets on to the left over there. I think I've done the housekeeping okay. Right. Let me just say that the Friends had a great night last Thursday with Leslie Smith. I have provisionally booked her for the 27th of August 2026. So she's going to come as Emma Hampton. Is that okay? Yes. So we've got that over and done with. Now in October, it does say, no it doesn't say. It could be Celia Lord, so I'll chase her up and see what gives on that one. Okay. On Tuesday the 24th of June, I received an invitation, accepted immediately, to go around to Gainsborough Hall by Tony, its owner, and the invitation of course came to Claire, who worked for West Lindsey, and she kindly set it up for me, although I didn't ask to go around Gainsborough Hall. I've always wanted to, so I jumped at the chance. I was like a little boy. It was a marvellous morning. The weather was kind to us and so forth. And I was smitten by references from time to time to the Hutton family. Indeed. And since then, now and again, occasionally, I've been dipping in to the Huttons. Now there's a massive amount of work on the Huttons and so forth. And it is, as you've seen, it is still work in progress. But they are a fascinating family. And what is interesting for me is that we have some of the buildings that are associated with them in this area. And of course, buildings are associated with people. And that also is fascinating as well. So we're very lucky to have some of the buildings which I'm going to talk about. So shall we move? Now for those who don't, now here is our coat of arms, which is very important as you go through the history and so forth. And the Latin is translated after darkness, I hope for light. Well, I think that's a pretty good motto indeed to have. And here we have, I thought as an introduction, some people might not know Knaith, or even Burton, or even Spridlington and so on. They're not new to me, of course, but I thought I'd just show you. And of course we've got the Lincoln Road, or the Gainsborough Road, which is the Lincoln Road, and we've got the chateau here that you often see as you're coming into Gainsborough from Lincoln. And a lot of people do wonder what it is. Is it a folly? Well, it isn't a folly. It's a very attractive residence. And then on the other side, and you often see the gateway if you're driving and so forth, the gateway to something called Burton Hall, which is over here. And then Spridlington is just off the A15. In fact, I was through it only the other day, and you come across this fine village with this saddleback tower of a church on the corner, especially if you're going to Howitt-Cowan and so forth. And so that gives you an idea of where these families were located. And here is one of the Huttons of Gainsborough in his wig. And what is interesting about him, they came from Treswell, or quite a few of them came from Treswell, but one of them, of course, came to Gainsborough and was a solicitor, a man of law. And you don't see a poor lawyer or a solicitor, do you? And they became quite wealthy, indeed. When they were building Gainsborough Parish Church, they pulled down the 13th century structure. Thomas Hutton contributed towards the building of that church. So we're in the 18th century, and here we have Gainsborough Hall, and here's the East Range, or the East Wing as we call it, and for a period, a short period of time, the 3rd Earl of Abingdon, Willoughby Bertie, here he is, lived there with his family. In fact, his son and heir was born there. And he had estates in Burton and Knaith. And the Huttons looked after it. And one day, the Earl decided to sell. And Hutton got in with his chance and bought Knaith. And before that, I'll just talk about the boy born to the 3rd Earl of Abingdon, who became the 4th Earl of Abingdon. Because these are important people, not just because they're in the peerage, they still are in the peerage, by the way, and they're Roman Catholic, always have been. And the 4th Earl of Abingdon, born in Gainsborough, was a great friend and patron of Haydn. And here is the record that I have at home, Haydn and the Earl of Abingdon, because the Earl of Abingdon was quite musical. But there's another interesting thing. Ditch the Pilgrim Fathers with the old hall, all a load of bunkum. But the American connection is stronger with the 4th Earl of Abingdon. Because when he succeeded to the title, he used his seat in the House of Lords to side on the whole with the colonists in America. He wanted a consensus with them and so forth. And of course nobody listened to him. But the Americans, once they settled down, they remembered the Earl of Abingdon. And if you go to New York, there is a small park in New York that is known as the Abingdon Park, in honour of the Earl who spoke up for them. So when you read that we were against and so forth, it's it's not as clear cut. And George III, to his credit, granted he was the king and blamed for that and the other, which was largely untrue. He was very, very kind to the Americans and the politicians. Indeed, he was very warm to them and so forth, which shows the stature of the man. So we're dealing with some important people. So they decided to sell their estates and so forth. And Thomas would be at his office in the week, and he had built for himself the chateau at Gainsborough. And we believe a 19-year-old actually designed it. And here is one of the sketches. These steps were never, we think, part of it in the end, but were not built and so forth. And here we've got John Platt, 19. He came from a background of architects and sculptors, quite a distinguished family indeed. I think this was the only one out of the count in the county that he So he built this. And this was Thomas Hutton's resort. He would be at his office at the weekend, and at the weekend he would come and live here. And this was before Burton was ever thought of as such. So this was built about 1745 by a 19-year-old. Granted, it's not of the strict classical design and so forth. However, it's a lovely piece of heritage. And here it is, look. It looks more like a doll's house and so forth, and probably a lot of you have been in it. But it is absolutely, it's a gem and wonderful. And it's very nice when I'm coming back from Lincoln and you see the lights on, it's got it really is something extraordinary. And here's another view. That's on the north side. And here's the ground floor. The ground floor, of course, was for the man who looked after Thomas. When Thomas was here for the weekend, Thomas would have the first floor and his man would have downstairs, of course. And there's the first floor. And we shall see more as we go. Well, John Flack was responsible for different houses. Indeed, he did the woodhouse, part of the structure there, and so forth. He designed this fireplace in here. And he worked on quite a few stately homes and sculptures and so forth. Here it is, hidden away. Here's another look. And I from time to time, I speak to artists, and they say to me, always put a horse or a human being in your picture. And here you've got it. And the interesting thing is you've got that quite early. And of course, this was a magnet for all sorts of occasions. And here we've got the Cowan Society performing Bach in 1937. This is on the north side. And here you've got the Cowan Society in 37, on the north side again, enjoying themselves. But over time, of course, it fell into dilapidation, and this is part of the structural problems attached to it. It needed a friendly, indeed, to look after it and so forth. These piles, whether small or large, are very costly and so forth. And it really was in a bad state. It was in need of love. And the owner, out of love, decided to do something about it. Here's some more. You could weep, couldn't you, how time takes even breaking in without a listen and so forth. There's another view for you. This is 1982. There's the fireplace look. Looks absolutely lost, doesn't it? There's another. People have broken in. And there's the rescue. The Landmark Trust came in 82. The site was gifted by its owner, and the rescue began. And one of the thrills I have personally is to see something that is, it could be a clock. I'm thinking of some of mine, and to bring them back into order. And here we've got a rescue of a very attractive building. Grade 2. And let's see what they did with it. looks like downstairs. It's absolutely wonderful. The staircase, beautiful. Now we're going up onto the first floor. Look at that fire. Can you see whoops? The bedroom is just off the sitting room. Here's another view. Now I'm not getting any royalties for this, but it just gives you an idea of the cost of 2 nights. And I even put in October just in case you would look at yourselves and so forth. And the Landmark Trust have done an excellent job on this property. And in order to sustain it, here you can book your time, which is absolutely marvellous. It's hidden away, more or less, very quiet, peaceful. And if you read the city life, rush of time and all the pressures, it's a lovely place to come and just relax. So we've got Henry Hutton, the barrister at law here, and they spread out, the family spread out quite a lot, and they went to Cherry-Willingham. This is the church at Cherry-Willingham. The original was pulled down and they built this 18th century structure, and you've got mention of different Huttons in the church. And here's another one of them, the eldest son, Henry William Hutton, who inherited Sherwood Hall from his mother, and lived there for 6 years of his marriage, and he was the first member of the family to have a military career. Now, quite a few of the Huttons did go into the military, as well as the church, as well as law. And this is the picture of him, aged about 18 in his uniform. And, looks quite smart, doesn't it? Now, I'm getting to Gainsborough Hall. 1745, I think, is the year for the chateau. For Gainsborough Hall, it's 1775, I think. Something like that. And this comes from the National Gallery. And they say it's Burton Hall, okay, which is exciting in itself. But then there are some difficulties with this one. As we'll see, this is a brick building. Okay? I'm just letting out clues, okay? And the years for the rent and so forth are difficult, and so forth. It's done by the famous artist Joseph Rice Darby, and it's beautiful. It really is. To buy this on the market, you would be, a few thousand. But I personally don't think it is Gainsborough. But I might be wrong. Okay. And here's Gainsborough Hall, 1861. And as you can see, it's the little pipe in comparison to the expansion that happened in, say, 1913 or so. And then you've got the Church of St. Helens, which is heavily associated with the Huttons. The church itself was old, but pulled down in 1866, and the only relic, more or less, of the old is the font. And they built this 19th century structure that was served for many years by the Huttons. The Huttons, of course, had the patronage, could appoint the priest, and you always appointed So you feel when you go through those, up to the house you're trespassing, if you turn right to the church, you're okay. And here's a nice one, which is very small. That's the south side. And that's the church from the door, the front door, the west door. And this is the sanctuary with the beautiful reredos painted. The saints and Christmas Eve and so forth. I thought that was painted by Comber. I'd almost swear that he was Comber. But I discovered he was painted by Howard, who was a disciple of Comber. And you can see, once you see Comber's work, it shouts at you, and you can see the influence of Comber in that. And it is a beautiful reredos. And of course your eye is attracted there, as it should be, to the altar. This is a Catholic family, an Anglo-Catholic family, high church people. They were high church all the way through, ministers, and loyal to the Anglo-Catholic movement. Here it is, there's the reredos in his door. I could look at that for hours. It's absolutely beautiful, exquisite. And we're very fortunate to have it. And this is a dedication because the church is full of Huttons, and the Sanders are referenced as well, but we're dealing with the Huttons at the moment. And here it is. This is a lovely window, stained glass, 19th century, given by the children, I think, of the Reverend George Thomas Hutton, and so forth. He doesn't exactly look very warm and welcoming, does he? And this is the Reverend Henry Frederick Hutton, who was very much loved when he became vicar. He was appointed by his brother. His cousin, really. His cousin owned Spridlington, and when the cousin died, he left everything more or less to Henry. So he was the rector and so forth. And he enlarged the old church, built the school and rectory and now the hall. Now the interesting thing is that is literally typical of 19th century vicars who have something about them. They would build the church, modernise the church if you like, build the school and so forth. And this is absolutely typical indeed. He was greatly loved. And as you can see, he served 30 or 32 years. And when he died, they pulled down the church that he'd done so much to keep up in his memory. And secular is Spridlington. It is lovely inside. Being chair of the open churches gives you that privilege, if you like, of going into these churches and seeing them and are struck by them. And you have a lot of references to the Huttons in Browns. This is the rectory at Gainsborough, which is a gem. It really is a beautiful building. I look at these buildings and I think, I wonder whether it's warm in the winter. No, I'm quite happy with what I've got. So I don't cover it, but I do. And this has been the rectory, probably on the site of the old rectory altogether. And here's another one, which I think is, that view I think is very delightful indeed. And it's a huge pile. You know, the rector, the vicar, was somebody in authority, some had status, and all the rest of it, and they lived in a building that to accommodate them altogether. beauty of Burton isn't just the house, it's the landscape, which makes the building, you know. And so many people these days don't give that space to their big house. You need it to project it, and so forth. That is absolutely wonderful. And there it is, the space. I always go on about space because the way we're building houses today, there isn't much space for people and families and so forth. And I'm one of these people who think you need space. Probably not as much as Burton, granted, but it is absolutely wonderful. A real green line to Gainsborough and so forth. And I pinched this. I wasn't prepared to buy it just for this picture, so I've been naughty. Indeed, this is the Burton part of this estate, and it's this side that is, for me, very important indeed. I remember Tony and Claire taking me and looking on. This is the oldest part. This is the 18th century part. 1875, roughly, here. And it is lovely. The brickwork isn't red at all. It's a kind of cream brick, and in its raw state, it would have looked absolutely wonderful. And of course, like Wentworth Woodhouse, when the Sanders took over in 1907, by 1913 they were building another big house at the back of it, and it's just enormous. Well, it is for me anyway, absolutely enormous. But this side is magic. I mean, that side is attractive, don't get me wrong, but the early part has something about it. And thank God it wasn't refaced by the Sanders, which was a popular thing to do. And over here, and I stand a bit unstable blocks as well. But it's absolutely magic. And you get a sense of the magic of the thing. Going up the driveway, you turn right to the church, and you go on to the house. And this is the old part, the 18th century part. And at the back, you can see the 20th century, early 20th century section that it was built on. I think the 18th century one, if it survived, I think I could live very comfortably in it. I don't think I could. It's such a huge place. Indeed, it needs a family. Indeed, not a chap just like me. Mind you, there are plenty of places for my books and my grandfather clocks. There's another Thomas Hutton, Burton, the gentleman. And I think this is what they're mobile. They started off as lawyers, and then they took the prize, land, property, a position in society, and so forth. And they did well. There it is, just the house, the 18th century house, without the modern addition, and so forth. I don't know what he's looking about, and is in the picture. And there's another thing, horses, and they're still there. The horses are still there, We've talked about this, and I've come back to it, because these are red bricks. And the original 18th century property, because the painting isn't a red brick at all. And I don't think it was rented out as early as when Burton was built. So there are a lot of houses that could compete with being that. So I take on the painting altogether. It is a beautiful painting. Mr. and Mrs. Cotman had just recently been married. Here's the original hall. The front. That you see as you go up the driveway. And here's the new one. Of the original. That's 1861. And here you've got the original front. 18th century look, you've got, and the pediment. The windows, the symmetry is wonderful. There really is a wonderful survival. And here you've got the 20th century edition at the end. Here's the side view. Again, you can see the bricks are not red. This is good. Beautiful. And I love the sea of chimney pots and so forth. Really lovely. And here's another side view of the original house, which was added. And here's your stable, now recycled, making accommodation for people. The person who is in here really making a good effort to make it a lovely garden when I was there, which is good to see. And this is the north side, the modern side, 1913 side. Again, it's aping the 18th century to some extent. The symmetry's there. It's just 20th century. It just shows you what we can build, and it stands very proudly at the back. And the artist for that is Detmar Lowe. He designed that, and the person who commissioned him was the person who bought Burton in 1907. And then by 1913, I think, he started the edition and so forth. Of course, he had a family and he needed space. And here is part of the inside of the building. One of the exciting bits for me was to see the staircase, believe it or not. I've seen the staircase lined with choir boys from Lincoln Cathedral who gave a carol concert in the hall a few years ago now, and they were all lined up there for a nice photo and so forth. But it is absolutely wonderful. Here's a secret door, if you like, secret passage, which all houses more or less have. I think I'm right that this room is a lovely sitting room for the family, and it's lined with wood. Cedar. Yeah, cedar, yeah. And it is really nice. It's a lovely room. And it's a house that's lived in, it isn't a museum. It's a house that's lived in, which is very important indeed. Now we come to the room that took my breath away, and that is the dining room. As you can see, it's a very big room, big space, but the decoration is really good. You know, some thought has been given to it, indeed. And here you've got the fireplace and so forth. Magical. Even having beans on toast in there would be something. You know, it really is a lovely room, and I compliment the owner on that. A real winner. We've gone back to Spridlington, haven't we? Commemorating the Reverend Henry Frederick Hutton with a church. And the church that was built in his memory was done by the man from Laos. And I particularly don't like his work. Fowler, James Fowler. I'm very critical. Nearly every church in Lincolnshire had a Fowler. Fowling it up, in my opinion. The best one is St. Swithin's, Lincoln. That is to his credit. But he didn't do a bad job on this one. I'll be honest with you. That's just my personal view. And here's the grave of Henry Frederick. That's Spridlington. And there's George Hutton. And here's another one, Arthur Wollaston Hutton. Wollaston was his mother's surname. And he is interesting for various reasons for me, because he was a priest of the Church of England. As you can see, he was rector of the family estate. He crossed the Tiber in the 1970s. That meant that he became a Roman Catholic. That's the expression we use, he crossed the Tiber. And he joined Newman, and that's exciting for me, indeed, because I'm a great fan of Carl Newman. Two of the greatest theologians in the church, whether Catholic or Anglican, are Augustine of Hippo and Newman. They really were tremendous in their I spent several years studying Newman and Augustine. So he crossed the Tiber. I would love to have met him and to have known Newman something. Here's inside Spridlington Church. It's huge. It has no aisles. It was built that way. And it has no screen. So your vision is absolutely perfect. And it has a splendid organ. And here are some windows dedicated to the Huttons. Here's one, the east window. What's on? Dedicated. Beautiful stained glass. Not Kent, which I always look out from, but nevertheless they're lovely. And here's another one, Christ in the Temple. And these are new to me. I've never heard of even Butler Bay. And in that church, there is this dedication to Michael Hutton, who died, as you can see. He was killed in action in 1941, buried abroad, aged 22. And the memorial was to him because his grandfather was once there. He was a Hutton. And this relief is absolutely marvellous, you know. And the designer, Samuel William Willis, notice that it was done in 1947, a year after the sculptor was dead. And if you were to buy anything by Willis, you're paying a lot of money, indeed. So we're very fortunate to have this dedication to and it captures him beautifully. A boy of 22, wonderful. And here it is. A Hutton, nevertheless, although he was born in Dorset and buried in Devon. And then we come to Winchester, which I know well. When I was a student, I often holidayed down there. And in Winchester, one of the Huttons was Dean. And here's a picture. I struggled to get a picture of this one. But Dean Hutton, he was an academic, and he lived in the deanery. Yeah, it's one of the most sumptuous deaneries in the Church of England. Absolutely wonderful. And if you care to, you can go on holiday at the moment, because the deanery is vacant, and you can holiday down there. Is it 26,000 for so many weeks or something like that? It's to earn money for Winchester Diocese. Charles II took his mistress there, and the dean of the day told him to, observe etiquette and get rid of her. he quite a story. And this is the grave of Dean Hutton in this cathedral at Winchester. And I like the obituary. Born May the 24th, came of clerical and academic stock. But he didn't then mention legal as well, because that is the foundation of their work. His father was rector. In his Oxford days, Dr. Hutton used to ask his visitors to observe that his crowded bookshelves represented the collections of 3 generations of dons, his great-uncle, his uncle, and himself. And he was indeed most thoroughly an Oxford man. Credible person. He must have been pleased as punch to be made Dean of Winchester, because there was plenty of room for him in that building. And he was an academic. He wrote many books, and I've only picked these. You can get these from Amazon if you wish. John Wesley, which would appeal to him being a Lincolnshire man, and Hampton Court. But he wrote quite extensively on lots of other subjects. And the death of the Dean, which we regret to recall this morning, deprives the Church of England of a charming personality. Copious and cultured writer, and a man who combined with an alert interest in current affairs something of that benign detachment from them which characterised dignitaries of the English Church in its peaceful and opulent past. Everything could be said today. Everything could be said today. So he would have been a nice man to have met in many ways. And then I come to this is a quick tour of the Huttons. There are an enormous amount of them, all contributing to rule the army of the church and so forth. But I end, I think, on this one, Frederick Wollaston Hutton. The middle name, of course, comes from his mother. And he was born at Burton and so forth. His father was a director and all that. And he went into the army. He read science at King's College, London, and so forth. And he was at Crimea. Now, interesting in Crimea, because of course, sadly, we've got the war going on in Ukraine. The Russians moved into Crimea. I'm sure Ukraine would like it back. But he was at the Crimea War, which is interesting again, how I must say this to you, I never thought that I would live to see such a tension that exists at the moment with the possibility of, say, a Third World War or whatever, and anti-Semitism and so forth. I always remember my professors and so forth talking about World War I and the Russian Revolution. And I can see how we stumbled into World War I. And it frightens me. It frightens me. I never thought I'd be able to see this. Anyway, I do a detour. And he became a geologist, a scientist, and so forth. Now, I'm not into science such, but I came a very interesting man who made a tremendous contribution to New Zealand, because that's where he went and lived and worked. And I think if you go to New Zealand and in the right circles and so forth and mention Hutton, that you will be well received. This is the Reverend Adam's secretary, and over here we've got Charles Darwin. What is the relationship between him and Hutton? Well, Hutton sided with Charles Darwin on the origin of species, the law of survival and all this sort of thing, and entered into correspondence with Darwin, which we have. This man was a geologist and so forth, a clergyman, but he couldn't go in with the origin of species. It was too fundamental and too uncomfortable for him. However, Hutton wrote to Darwin and said how much he appreciated his book, his theory, and all the rest of it. And Darwin, of course, responded to him and so forth. He died at sea, this young man. And as you can see on this memorial, he died at sea, and it gives the longitude or whatever of it. It reminds me of the memorial in Lee Church, which gives the thing of one of the Andersons. And there it is, you see, 27th of October 1905. And Hutton was a great scientist in New Zealand and so forth. And when he died, the New Zealanders recognised the contribution that he made to science in their country. So every year now, it used to be every 2 or 3 years, they would present what is known as the Hutton Medal. And it's still given to distinguished science and so forth. That gives you his profile, and at the back you've got something of New Zealand and the animals associated with it, which is a nice way, isn't it, to be remembered. That it even gets better. What do you think of that little creature? It is named after Hutton. Hutton Field. Beautiful, isn't it? So when I go, please, just a little bird named after me. But it is lovely, bright and cheerful. And I've rushed through on time. But I do thank these people, Tony and Claire, who were with us this evening, and John, who's here, and Carol Hazelwood, who's been doing quite a bit of research, the Landmark Trust, Sue Etherington, Adrian Credit, and there's a cache of documents and so forth. I said it was a work in progress. It still is. So when the lady, Tony, couldn't give the talk on being an artist this evening because she would be diagnosed with breast cancer, because Tony had been very kind to take me around his home, I was smitten with the Huttons. So on and off through the summer, which has been a busy summer for me, I dipped into the Huttons, and I sort of shared with you, I think. I hope I haven't lost you, but they're a wonderful family indeed, and what a contribution, they've made. Incredible. There we have it. I got there at the end. We did more work on it, I know we did, but I thought it's too early, too late to try and get somebody to speak. But we got me into that, please. Okay.
Are there any relation to the... Sorry, I was just going to say, are there any relation to the Buttons?
There are. Yeah, we've got some.
Oh, how lovely.
Yes.
I understand Burton was a maternity home.
Yes, it was a maternity.
Hospital.
Yeah.
During the Second World War.
Yes, it was a maternity hospital.
Home.
Yeah, yeah. I can't claim that I was born there, but there are people who can.
They were all from Hull. They were investigated from Hull.
Yeah. We have here, we've got Tony Morris here, Mr. Tony Morris, and his daughter Claire, and we've got John Burke of Knaith as well. So we've got quite a lot to thank them for.
Very, very interesting. You did a great job of putting everything together, or at such short notice. And
Yes, probably, yes.
done marvellous.
Well, it's given you an overview, hasn't it, indeed? And if you get the chance to go on a snowdrop walk to Knaith, I think they walk. Do you still walk up to the river?
Snowdrop walking people.
Yeah.
Go from
So you could go to the chateau. Yeah. Although I've given you the bookings and the dates, haven't I? Yes.
And I just couldn't get over how small it was.
Yes.
I can't imagine living there.
No. No.
Beautiful building then.
When is the church open? When I took my son there, 10 days ago, it was all locked up. Do you know when it's open?
Is that St. Mary's?
No,
Gate
Burton Church. I mean, you have to ring up in advance.
Yes, I think you have to.
Most country churches.
I think they will come and do it.
There was a slight risk of leaving it open during the daytime, didn't it?
Yeah.
You could have made a telephone call.
It was open this year on the Churches Festival in May.
Yes.
It's the first time I can call it being open, perhaps it will be next year.
The word Claire was manning it. Partly. Yeah. They had a good number of people.
Yeah, I went, it was lovely, it was really nice.
What we want is a banner, isn't it, to encourage.
In fact, actually, all of the churches you mentioned, I visited you in different West End churches. So it is an ideal opportunity, isn't it, to get around it.
The churches.